Recording in progress.
Chair Williams, we are ready to begin.
All right, thank you. Okay, welcome to this regular meeting of the Planning Commission this Tuesday evening, June 13th. I now call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ashley, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Williams,
Present.
Vice Chair Nutter,
Present.
I don't know what that was.
me neither. I'll continue. Commissioner Nugent,
Present.
Commissioner Patel,
Present.
Commissioner Wiggins.
Present.
I'm sorry, did I miss you, Vice Chair Nutter?
You called him. Should we share our speaker? Should I move my microphone over?
See if there's any cord that's partially plugged.
Otherwise, I can move this over in between us, and we can just switch it back and forth.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, while Commissioner Ebneter moves to a better microphone, I wanted to note that Commissioner Wiggins is joining remotely this evening from the Business Center of Hyatt Ziva Los Cabos in Paseo Malecon, San Lote 5, San Jose del Cabo, Mexico, 23405. We wish we were there, too. Okay, and an agenda has been posted at that location. All right, so good evening and welcome. We're happy to be here in person, but also to have options for virtual participation. So for those attending in person, complete a yellow slip, request to speak slip, and hand it to the clerk. And if you're participating remotely tonight, use your raise your hand feature in Zoom, and you'll be called upon at the appropriate time. If you're calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute yourself. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for that specific item. Okay, so at this time, we'll move on to the consent calendar. So Ashley, can you please read the consent calendar for us?
Yes. Item number 1, Planning Commission meeting minutes approval. Approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 9th, 2023.
Okay. Is there any member of the commission who would like to pull this item off the consent calendar? No? And Commissioner Wiggins? No. If there's any members of the public that would like to comment on the consent calendar item, now would be the time to make your comment. This is for consent calendar items only. Would anyone like to, are there any public speakers?
Chair Williams, we have no public speakers.
Okay, great. So would anyone like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All right. Can I have a vote, please?
Yes. Chair Williams,
Yes?
Vice Chair Nutter,
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wiggins.
Yes.
All right. So at this time, we'll move on to the public comment section of the agenda. And next on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment on any item that is not appearing on the agenda may address the Planning Commission at this time. State law prevents the commission from taking any action on any matter that's not on the agenda, but your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. Public comments generally limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, that's subject to the commission's discretion and can be extended if the commission wishes to do so. So at this time, I want to open it for public comment. Are there any speakers?
Chair Williams, we have no public commenters.
Okay. Okay, so if there are no public commenters, then we can go ahead and close that item. So we'll close the public comment period and move on to the public hearing portion of our agenda. So item number 1, Ashley, can you read item number 1, please?
Yes. Item number 2, 2164 Palm Avenue, new private indoor tennis court facility, PA 2022-88.
All right, thank you. So we will start with a staff presentation, followed by an applicant presentation, and then any opportunity for any clarifying questions from the commission, and then any public comments. The applicant will be given up to 15 minutes to present, and members of the public are given 2 to 3 minutes to speak, depending on the number of speakers. The applicant may also be given 5 minutes at the end to respond to any public comments. Once the public hearing is closed, the commission will deliberate and render a decision on the project. Finally, if a decision is made tonight, the decision of the Planning Commission on this project can be appealed to the City Council within 10 calendar days. All right. So with that, we can go ahead with the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Good evening, Planning Commissioners and members of the public. My name is Laura Richstone. I am an Associate Planner with the Community Development Department and will be presenting this project to you tonight. I will provide an overview of the project proposal and background, its compliance with state and local regulations, a walkthrough of the building design, and conclude with a recommended modification to several conditions of approval and an overall project recommendation. The project site is located at 2164 Palm Avenue between 20th and 21st Avenues and is approximately 14,900 square feet in size. It's zoned C4, service commercial, and designated as service commercial in the city's general plan land use map, and is currently an open parking lot with an approximately 700 square foot outbuilding shed structure on the site. As seen in this map, the project site is adjacent to other C4 service commercial uses to the north, which is the pink, and south, and backs up to regional commercial uses to the west, which is the orange along El Camino Real. Adjacent uses include retail uses to the west, commercial and auto repair uses to the south and east, and supportive housing to the north. The site is also located in a special flood hazard zone, and per the conditions of approval is subject to the city's floodplain management ordinance. The applicant has proposed to construct a new indoor private tennis court facility for personal use. The facility would be 2 stories and includes 1 indoor clay tennis court, exterior storage shed, lobby, a bathroom with shower facilities, a warm-up area, and a 2-car garage and surface parking lot to accommodate 4 on-site parking spaces on the ground level. And the second story of the building would include a second bathroom with shower facilities, a post-tennis activity area / clubhouse room, a closet, additional storage, and mechanical room. And overall, the structure would be around 14,553 square feet in size. 2 planning entitlements are required to permit the proposal. 1, a site plan and architectural review, SPAR permit, for the construction of a new structure. And the second entitlement is a special use permit, SUP, to allow for a private, non-commercial recreational use in the Service Commercial District as a compatible use. To permit a compatible use, the Planning Commission must find that the proposed use is so similar to a specifically allowed use in the district, in this case, private versus commercial recreation, as to be virtually identical in terms of impacts and land use requirements. A little project history. So the pre-application for this project began early last year. A neighborhood meeting was held in February 22, and it was followed by a Planning Commission study session in March of 2022. Items discussed at the Planning Commission during that time included the need for the project to conform with the pedestrian and bicycle master plans, to allow for future bicycle lanes along Palm Avenue, concerns about allowing a private recreational use in the Service Commercial District, and if 3 parking spaces were sufficient to meet the parking demand of the use and site. The Planning Commission at that time supported the building design with no building recommendations or design recommendations, and also was in favor of supporting the SUP for a private recreational use in the C4 Service Commercial District. Following the study session, a site-specific parking study was completed in September of last year, 2022. Moving on to the formal application. So a formal application for this project was submitted late last year, November 2022, and a revised design was proposed in February of this year. The revised design includes the removal of an interior surface area from the building to allow for a 2-car garage to accommodate 4 spaces on site. It also included the removal of a proposed 7-foot wall along the front property line, the introduction of a steel guardrail along the 2nd story on the front elevation, and the addition of a 3-foot deep recess area and roll-up door halfway along the north side elevation for additional ventilation, and we'll go through those later in the presentation. Regarding local code and policy review, the project has, as I said, a general plan land use designation of service commercial and is zoned C4 service commercial to align with the general plan. The project is compliant with the development standards of the C4 district, including height, setbacks, and FAR. Regarding parking, the project is compliant with bicycle parking and provides 1 short-term bicycle parking space where 1 is required. And 4 vehicle parking spaces are provided where the zoning code would require a minimum of 17 spaces. However, this is influenced by AB 2097, which we will address in later slides in the presentation. Regarding the public realm in front of the project, the existing sidewalks along Palm Avenue average around 5 feet wide and typically have an additional paved area of about 3 to 5 feet between the back of sidewalk and front property line. An 11-foot wide sidewalk has been proposed for this project to bring the project into greater conformance with the pedestrian master plan, which has a recommended 14-foot minimum sidewalk width to include a buffer zone as seen in this picture to the right. The width of the sidewalk also greatly interplays with a planned separated bicycle lane along the segment of Palm Avenue. Compared to the study session plans, the plans before you today have a sidewalk width that was reduced to 11 feet, as seen here. So this is the current proposal of 11 feet wide, to maintain the existing curb line along Palm Avenue, so as not to expand into the right-of-way, the road, and impede the width of the road for future planned bicycle lanes. As mentioned earlier, regarding parking, 17 parking spaces would be required for the tennis court and clubhouse area per the city's municipal code. Due to the proposed personal use of the site, a parking study was conducted by the city's transportation consultant in 2022, and the study concluded that 3 to 4 spaces would be appropriate for the private personal use case of this project. to reduce the risk of parking spillover into the commercial parking areas along Palm Avenue. This brings us to 2023. So Assembly Bill 2097 became effective at the beginning of this year. And this bill limits the city's ability to impose local parking requirements for projects located within a half mile of public transit. And this project site is approximately 0.4 miles from the Hillsdale Caltrain station and would be subject to 2097. The current proposal includes 4 on-site parking spaces, which are highlighted in blue to the right, which would reduce spillover into Palm Avenue. Regarding the design of the structure, the next several slides will provide a walkthrough of the site plan, floor plans, elevations, and proposed colors and materials. So the first story of the 2-story tennis structure is dominated by the tennis court itself, which is highlighted in orange here. Other areas on the ground floor include the garage, which is in green, a warm-up area in blue, and access, storage areas, a fire control room, and a bathroom area with shower facilities in gray. The second story of the structure, highlighted in blue, here includes a second bathroom with shower facilities, the clubhouse area, a closet, additional storage, and a mechanical room. Development, segueing into the front elevation. So development along the semi-industrial area of Palm Avenue includes a mix of 1 to 2-story structures that are predominantly square in building form and employ stucco, brick, or a combination of the two materials for their exterior materials. Oh, sorry. The proposed structure is more contemporary in its architectural style, but retains a low boxy square building form or profile along the front facade, which is complementary to the surrounding small warehouse and commercial buildings along Palm Avenue. Proposed exterior materials include a warm brown brick veneer along the front of the building and larger square windows at the second story, along with a cement canopy to create a distinction between the first and second stories. We also have material colors and samples at the front if the Planning Commission would like me to bring them. The building employs 2 roof forms, a flat roof over the first front portion of the building and an arched fabric roof assembly over the tennis court portion. And this side elevation better illustrates the 2 roof forms. So you can see the flat roof over the front of the building and then the arched roof over the tennis court structure in the rear. The same brick veneer at the front will wrap around the sides of the building for approximately 50 feet, and then we'll transition to cement panels for the tennis court section of the building. And as mentioned before, the applicant has included a 3-foot recess and roll-up door halfway along this north elevation to provide additional ventilation for the tennis court. The left side of the structure will also have the same brick veneer and cement panel materials. However, most of this elevation will be obscured by the adjacent building, which corresponds to the darker gray outline on the elevation. So the cement panels that wrap around the sides will also wrap around the rear of the tennis court structure. And the rear elevation also includes an attached storage shed and fencing, which you can see better in this graphic. This elevation will also be partially visible from El Camino, which is better visually captured by the graphic in the upper right. And then this graphic in the upper left provides an illustration of what the structure would look like as seen from the south at the end of an alley that terminates right at the property line at the rear. For this project, several project-specific conditions of approval were included in the staff recommended conditions, and they include conditions that require compliance with the city's floodplain ordinance and building code, a condition that grants the Community Development Department the ability to require an updated TIA, traffic impact analysis, upon a change of use, and landscaping conditions to ensure that public art, if required, would not be obscured by any proposed landscaping, and that the proposed parking lot landscaping would be appropriately sized and located, or that root barriers would be provided for the trees in the parking lot to avoid conflicts with above or below ground public utilities along this area of Palm Avenue. Still in the conditions, so staff also recommends a revision to two of the conditions of approval. The first, condition of approval number 8, requires that the construction within the flood hazard area, which this falls within, requires that this construction to comply with the building code and city's floodplain ordinance. The proposed revision to this condition would still require compliance with these regulations, but simplifies the language. So many of the options and avenues of compliance, many options and avenue for compliance with these codes are available. And what was removed was potential pathways, but we cannot enumerate all pathways. So we were simplifying the language in this, this revised condition. And then prior to building permit issuance, city staff would work with the applicant to review the proposal to ensure that it would meet the local and state regulations for safety and compliance. The second revised condition deals with condition number 26. Due to the 0 lot lines of the structure of the project site and the structure located to the left at 2180 Palm Avenue, the revised condition either requires a maintenance agreement for the roof flashing if it's attached to the adjacent building, or allows the applicant to propose a different flashing or waterproofing design if a maintenance agreement with the adjacent property owner cannot be reached. So this revision allows a little more flexibility for the applicant. Staff also recommends a condition of approval be added to the project. Our recommendation for this condition, as seen here, would be to limit the use of the sites to personal use only. And it would require any change of operation or use to a commercial, community serving, or nonprofit profit use to be reviewed and approved by the Community Development Director in order to assess and capture and evaluate potential impacts such as TDM measures before those changes occur to make sure that any change of use would be required to get the necessary building permits or business licenses. So overall, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to approve the site plan and architectural review SPAR permit for the new 2-story, 14,553 square foot private indoor tennis court facility, and a special use permit to allow a recreational use in the service commercial district based on the findings and modified conditions of approval, and a categorical exemption from environmental review pursuant to section 15332, infill development of the California Environmental Quality Act. That concludes my presentation. Thank you. If you have any questions, I am here to answer.
All right, thank you, Laura. Okay, at this time, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Hello, Planning Commissioners. Thank you for having me and my colleague here. I'd like to ask, is my client on Zoom somewhere? He's at the French Open, or at the end of the French Open, and was hoping to speak. Is he here?
Yes, I am, if you can hear me.
Oh, okay.
All right, great,
Well,
we can hear you.
He trumps me, so he's going to start off with kind of his introduction.
All right, go right ahead, we can hear you.
Okay, well, hello, Commissioners. It's good to see you again. I apologize I couldn't be there in person, but I'm in Europe, as George alluded to. Since it's been a while, it's 15 months since we last met, and we have a new commissioner. My architect thought it'd be useful if I reiterate my motivations for this indoor tennis court. Can you go to the next slide, please? So obviously, you probably realize I'm quite passionate about tennis. I was born in Paris and grew up watching the French Open, which is one of the 4 Grand Slam events in tennis. I don't know if any of you play tennis or have ever been to the French Open, but it's absolutely beautiful, and the stadiums are like cathedrals. I highly recommend it. What makes the French Open so special is that it's the only Grand Slam that's held on a clay surface. And for whatever reasons, clay courts like the ones at the French Open don't exist in the United States, much less California. It's very disappointing because playing on clay is very different, and in my opinion, much better. Unlike hard courts, you can slide on the clay. The game is much slower, and most importantly, it's much easier on old bodies. Outside of playing myself, I really just want to share the experience and expose, people to what it's like. Could you please skip to the next slide? So I won't go into much detail here. I'll just focus on a couple on why, we believe this project should be granted a special use. Most importantly, a private tennis court is practically identical to a commercial tennis court, but in terms of an impact to the surrounding area, a private tennis court will have dramatically less usage than a commercial court, and naturally it won't require any staff. And the last point I want to focus on is just in terms of precedent. There used to be an indoor tennis facility just across Palm Avenue. It was named, so from what I hear, it existed for 4 years. So I think that's all I wanted to highlight. So with that, I'll turn it over to my architect, George, and thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you, Nick. I'm architect George Myers, and the firm is Swap Myers Architects. Laura forewarned me that she was going to steal my thunder, and so she pretty much showed what the project looks like, and then Nick always steals my thunder, so I don't have a lot of thunder left to present, so I'll try to keep this short. The slides I'm going to show you, we did go back and put in all the original slides because there is one member that was not present 15 months ago when we presented this to you. And in those slides, I'm going to show you just quickly before and after. There are some changes, but they're relatively minor. Essentially, what we were trying to do here is to follow Nick's lead and essentially create a quiet, elegant metal and brick box that you enter for pre and post tennis activities that had a certain scale. There's elements on the building like the concrete cantilevered canopy that tries to create more of a horizontal line, reduce the scale, brings you in, and then once you're in the building, you move into this, as Nick said, cathedral space, this very open, sunlit space, which is completely covered in a translucent roof, letting light in. And in that sense, it's actually a very simple building, and the form of the building pretty much follows the plan of the site, or the site plan. So you probably can read these better on your screen than I'm reading them up here on the wall. But the upper plan is the original plan that we came in with 15 months ago, and you'll notice that what we originally called out as a kind of a pre-tennis area, where Nick, quite honestly, was planning on hitting the ball against the wall. That's what we were hoping to do. Is now, because of all the parking studies and everything, we had to convert that to parking. So the basic difference between before and after is that we flipped those two uses. The lobby now is on the south side, and the parking, which was this pre-tennis warm-up area, is on the north side. We had 3 parking spaces on the exterior, none on the interior, and for a whole variety of reasons, we now have 2 inside and 2 outside. That's the primary difference in that plan. The second level is almost identical to what it was before, except we flipped it. There's some changes in the design of the stair, but they're really pretty minimal as they affect the exterior design. The roof plan, again, is very, very, very similar. It's just this movable skylight that we had over the 2-story area, which is now the garage, has flipped to the other side. And I'm more than happy to go back and answer any questions about the sections, the heights. It's virtually identical, all the heights and dimensions, square footages that was presented to you previously. You probably know that several years ago we did what was originally called the Broadway Tennis Facility down the road that is now the Bay Club, which has 6 tennis courts inside of it. And it's obviously a much bigger structure, but in concept, it's the same system. It's a prefabricated steel system. The trusses will be made in Australia by Fabritecture. It's the same company who made them. And they'll be essentially made there, brought over. And actually, the erection of that main space will go up very, very quickly, which is a good thing. The portion of the building in the front is site-built. It's about 25% maybe of the total site area. So we're actually thinking that in terms of just construction sequence, because there isn't a lot of available land out there, that a lot of the sequencing, probably even parking, et cetera, can take place inside what will eventually be the tennis court while the portion in the front is built, because the other portions are being built somewhere else and then shipped in. The materials Laura's mentioned are relatively simple. It's brick, metal, there's some steel, there's some aluminum. We did keep it a dark bronze color. It's almost black, but it actually is a dark bronze. And then we felt it was appropriate to clad the tennis structure differently than the brick in the front. And part of that is because that's the nature of Roland Garros. There is the old brick facades that are in the front, and there's other buildings out there that are very different than the court itself that you enter. The scale's different, the architecture is different. And it didn't seem appropriate to continue the brick back. The building, the tennis court is itself very, very light, airy, so we are cladding it in a very durable cement panel that it will be a light color and kind of, hopefully, I wouldn't say blend in, but be sympathetic to the translucent, roof system we have. There is one change on the facade, which you can see in this rendering here, kind of on the middle. It was Nick's idea, and actually was a great idea, I think. He wanted to bring some natural ventilation in right where the the net is, because you don't have a lot of volume going on at the net. And working with the building department, we were able to work out a system where if we set it back 5 feet, we can actually do a garage door type opening on a fusible link and meet all the codes. And when we did that, it actually, I felt, provided an interesting opportunity to break the long facade. And I know somebody may build up against it sometime, but I have a funny feeling that that wall will be there a long time. And that's probably the most prominent facade that's in the entire project. So it was an opportunity to recess it, put some color in it, and I think it's, obviously you will comment on it, but I actually thought it was a nice way of really breaking that, the longer wall, giving it a different kind of scale and giving it some interest. I'll just take you around the different, sides of the building. Okay, I think I can do that. Probably not much to say about these. I think they hopefully speak for themselves. Let's see. One thing about this, and this was a new slide we put in because Nick had another new idea. He saw these emblems while he was over there about 10 days ago and sent them over and said, can't we do this on that wall, something like that, or at least use this particular color, which is more of a kind of almost a copper type color. And if it was acceptable to the commission, I think we'd like a little bit of leeway on this color to work with staff to kind of get something that really looks well there. Personally, I think because that recess is going to be there a while, and just given the nature of the use next door, I think it'd be great if perhaps you did something like this, not rolling garrows, but that was the actual artwork. And I understand there's been some opposition to that, but I think it's a very appropriate place to do something. And I think it could be a movable piece that if anyone ever built up against that building, we could either bring it to the front of the building. That would all have to be worked out. It would have to look good in both locations, but just something I'm throwing out there to you. Coming around the back of the building, we do have the storage shed. We take that shed seriously. I mean, it's part of the architecture. And so, everything from the cement plaster, reveals in the module, we have a metal cap that will be a similar anodized dark bronze color to the metal windows will come around the back. So we've tried to be consistent all the way around the building. One comment about this slide, and it was a difficult one to kind of show, the upper side panel of the roof is actually a translucent panel. Well, it's fabric itself, it's all fabric. You won't see the structure like you're seeing it here. It's going to appear white. It's going to be very much like if you drive by Broadway Tennis, you'll see a very similar thing. At night, you'll get a glow and you'll actually see a little bit of the structure, but it's not, this almost looks like it's transparent. You're actually going to see mostly panel. So just taking you around a few more slides. This is the space. You can see the kind of roll up, metal fire gate inside. This space is not conditioned. There will be a fan. The fan will move air, and that's why you see the louver on one side. The louver we're actually looking at would bring in the air.
I think we're just almost out of time. So
Okay.
come to a conclusion, please.
Anyway, I think we're just about there. Ta-da. Okay, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, great. All right, thank you for your presentation.
Should I stand here or go sit in?
I think you can be seated. We'll see if there's any questions from the commission first. Are there any clarifying questions from anyone? And I guess I should ask Martin. Commissioner Wiggins, do you have any clarifying questions at this time?
I have a couple. Can you hear me?
Yeah, why don't we start with you?
Trying to make sure I understand the distinction between personal and private commercial usage. So maybe to staff, do you have a clear understanding that what was recorded in the approval and the draft findings?
Can you repeat? You were kind of breaking up.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, to staff, do you have a clear understanding, and do you feel you've clearly defined in the draft findings this distinction of personal versus private versus commercial use? And what are we approving it for?
So, yeah, I think the applicant has made it very clear that this is personal private use, so there would be no commercial activity, as in no one would be coming in for, lessons. There wouldn't be any renting out of the property. From my understanding, the property owner would use this for himself and his friends for leisure when he has the time.
And I guess that's what I'm getting at, is how many friends, like, who really gets to use the court? Is it really personal, or is it whoever whoever's like lucky enough? I would say this looks awesome. Whoever's lucky enough to get an invite. Is that clear to everyone? Or is it a meaningful distinction in staff's mind?
I think it's a meaningful distinction because it's a clear distinction between a private personal use and a commercial public serving use. So it would be for a limited amount of people, for a limited duration of time, as opposed to a business, because you can only play tennis so long as an individual, as opposed to a business that might be open business hours and would have a rolling clientele. So there is a distinction on impacts and use between the two, private and personal, or
Okay.
commercial, excuse me.
And so, and I'll ask this to Nick in a moment, but just to follow this through, so Nick could throw a party there for as many people as would fit, right? That counts as personal use.
Yes, it's kind of similar to throwing a party at your house, essentially. Personal use. I think the distinction would come if there would be large regular occasions, like a party rental place, but there's nothing to preclude a large gathering right now of personal friends and family at this facility.
Could I just add something on that? Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, unless maybe we'll give you a chance at the end of our questions to respond.
I'm going to ask the same question to Nick, and we can jump in to George. Just, Nick, is that your sort of understanding as well? We're going to have friends, but it's not going to get to be too many people too frequently.
It's a little difficult to understand you. Can you repeat yourself? That last.
I'll ask the same question to Nick as the applicant. Just occasional friends over for this.
Yeah, I think I heard your question. So yeah, I mean, the intention is to play tennis. It's not there to throw parties, and I'm kind of an introvert anyways. But in terms of this is just in terms of a commercial versus private, this is a single tennis court. So really, even if I wanted to make this a commercial space, I mean, it's really not economically feasible to make any sort of money off of a single court. So it would, there's no way I would be able to do so. I'd have to fit, the tennis court can only really fit 4 people at a time. So, so that really isn't the intention at all. So, I don't know if that helps assuage your concerns or not, but it is definitely my intention for this to be private and limited use. I don't want to trash the place either.
Thank you. Insight to background. That's it for me.
Okay, no further questions? Okay. I'll start here. Commissioner Patel, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I have 2 questions. There was a little bit of discussion at the end about an art piece on the orange roll-up garage door, and it sounds like there may have been some concerns on staff's part about doing art there, and I was curious if staff could elaborate if there are any concerns or what it would entail to give approval to do an art piece on that roll-up door?
Yes, so City of San Mateo has regulations that basically say for any building permit valued 3 million or more, public art is required. The location of that public art and what that entails is kind of a joint venture between the applicant and the Public Arts Committee. And they come together and decide where on the building and what type of art to be appropriate, would be appropriate, excuse me. I reached out to our staff rep on the Public Arts Committee to ask some very preliminary inquiring questions about where public art could be placed on this subject building. And I asked the applicant to provide best and worst case scenarios. And one of those scenarios was on the side of the building. This is very preliminary and, not binding. I think the general discussion was that that might not be the committee's most favorable spot, because I think the goal of public art is to be viewed on the right-of-way, and I think, I'm not sure how far it's over, probably about 100 feet. It's about 100 feet deep, so public art in that recess would really only serve the adjacent inn and not so much people driving along Palm Avenue. So those are the discussions and considerations that would be further explored during that Public Arts Committee session.
Got it, thank you, that's very helpful. And so there would be a public art requirement for this project? Okay, great.
Correct.
My next question, I think, is for applicant or maybe staff. Looking at the plans, the garage is noted as a 2-car garage, but it looks quite deep. It looks like you could fit 4 cars in there if you were to park tandem. And so I was curious if it was intentionally that deep to allow for 4 cars to be parked in there, or if there was some other reason that the garage space is that large.
Well, quite honestly, and I think we presented it this way the first time we were here. The intention of that space was actually before you play tennis to warm. There's a different kind of warm-up. The area we call warm-up on the drawings, which is the other side, is stretching and, it's those kind of, calisthenics. The other type of warm-up is you hit the ball against the wall. And that the intention of that space, and if there aren't any cars in there, I think it's still going to be used that way, is to hit the ball up against the wall. There wasn't, quite honestly, a specific dimension that was based on, but it seemed like it was big enough to do that. That space didn't change from the previous submittal, and so we fit as best we could 2 cars in there. It looks like a big space, and it is a big space, but believe it or not, you can't get 3 cars in there with turnaround. We can actually barely get the second one in there. So it's a little, if it was your garage or my garage, I think we wouldn't have any trouble doing it, but meeting commercial requirements for backup, it's actually very tight. So hopefully that answers.
Yes, that does, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Any clarifying questions? Commissioner Nugent?
Thank you. Through the chair, I've got 2 questions. The first one is for staff. Actually, they're both for staff. So my question was, and I may have just missed it, but it looks like the revisions that you were describing during the presentation to the resolution and the conditions of approval, these were not included in the packet? Okay.
Yes, the 2 revised conditions, condition number 8 and 26, I believe, an older version was included in the packet, and we'd had, from Thursday publication date to now, we'd had internal conversations about amending those conditions, and the applicant also raised concerns about condition number 26, so the revisions are not reflected in the staff report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That was a perfect answer.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to know.
Through the chair, sorry, Manir Sandhir, planning manager, I would like to note that there is a new condition that is also proposed by staff that also was not in the staff in the resolution earlier, and that's related to the use being of a private, personal nature.
Okay, and will these conditions be available for the commission to see when we take a vote?
Yeah, they're in the staff presentation, which I can
Okay,
pull up.
thank you.
Yes.
And then the second question I have has to do with just the nature of this being a private facility and the requirements for public art. And this is a question for staff and perhaps the applicant. It may not be answerable at this point, but the question I have is, since this is a private facility and unlike a public facility that would be trying to advertise or show to the public what the facility was for, it seems to me that only a street number would necessarily be required. And would the signage in the front of the building that's proposed by the current architecture plan be considered public art?
I don't know if it would be considered public art. My guess would be no. I will have to say that, signs themselves require a building permit, and the size of that sign is proportional to the frontage of the building with all other commercial buildings. And it would, if public art were to be on the front of the facade, they would interplay with each other. So no, that's not to say that the Public Arts Committee wouldn't necessarily, they could potentially do a sign that is both sign and art, but that's really speculative. I don't know what that would look like.
I guess I'm just trying to understand what flexibility the Public Arts Committee has, because I'm sure they're going to figure something out that's appropriate. But I also want to make sure that they're set up in a way that doesn't bind their hands to do something that feels, like an appendage or unnecessary or inappropriate to the building and maybe detracts from it.
Through the chair, if I could address the question. So the intent of the public art standards is to require, and to allow for public art in the community. This is springing from code requirements as well as policies. And so most projects above a certain valuation are required to either provide public art, which then goes through its own process of review and approval, or provide an in-lieu fee that is then used towards public arts projects that the community can enjoy. So that's the broader intent, and the Civic Arts Committee is what reviews the public art through the public hearing process or through a public review process. And so there would be ample opportunity to look at what kind of public art is proposed. Our staff works closely with the applicant to ensure that the art is well designed and does not stick out, as you were saying earlier. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this facility would potentially be able to use an in-lieu fee if the Public Arts Committee felt that would be most appropriate.
I think they can decide, the applicant can decide if they would like to pay the in lieu or actually provide the art. It's only when the art is provided does the Public Arts Committee activate.
Okay, thank you so much. That's helpful.
All right, Commissioner Abner, do you have any questions?
Just a couple, thank you. Thank you, staff and applicant, for the presentations. I know that it's noted that this property is in a flood zone, yet the conditions of approval seems to have been left open for discussion. And I thought I had seen earlier in the report that the ground floor had to be raised a foot above flood line, which seemed unique. Is that still part of the conditions, or is it going to be alleviated in another manner?
So that has been stricken from the condition. That's one way to achieve compliance, but there are many other ways. You can do a combination of engineered openings, you can raise, which allow floodwaters to pass through, or you can raise the structure. There's also, you can do alternative means and methods, kind of like with fire. So instead of enumerating all potential possibilities, which we cannot do, we just remove those from the condition and just said, essentially, the project shall comply to both building code, which is compliant with FEMA, and to our local regulations for floodplain.
Great, thank you. And I know that we spoke yesterday morning in the pre-meeting with staff about adding a condition that if this use did change, all codes would be met. including access to facilities that are not accessible to handicapped people, such as the second floor. So that is covered in that future, or in that condition that you added?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. This is for the applicant, and I didn't even think about this until you showed some of slides on other facilities that show the tennis court and the grandstands. And I don't know if you have any plan on people coming to see exhibits or tennis matches, or how that would be arranged, and if that is, something that you are considering.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question. I at one point had even suggested a window that you could actually view from, because the size of the tennis court actually has no additional room for anybody to be standing if you're playing, kind of on a championship level, volley lanes. In fact, this is a few feet short, both in the width and the length from what Nick wanted it to be. But you could view it if you provided a window. Nick, the owner, did not want any viewing from the main facility. This is to play tennis. He felt it would be distracting if you were playing tennis to have a window. So, somebody, I suppose, in the future could come in and put in a window. I think they'd need a permit to do it, but we have absolutely no plans for that happening in terms of what we're presenting.
Great, thank you. And since the public art is being discussed, I really liked what you showed earlier. I thought it was a great piece of art. Would there be the possibility that could be used in the location that the applicant is applying for, and then fee in lieu of art to be used elsewhere? Just a thought, because I thought it was a pretty good solution. Thank you. That's all of my questions.
Okay, I just have a couple, although you guys all touched on most of mine, particularly Commissioner Ebner. But I do have one question. You touched on the flood zone question, but I appreciate the explanation of how that revision came to be. But what is the plan for complying, for the applicant, I guess, for complying with the flood zone requirements? Will it be engineered openings?
We don't have one, no. There's a bit of history on this, okay, as you might guess. So when I think, back in January of this year, we actually have been trying to get a clear answer on whether we were going to have to meet the 1 foot over floodplain, or we could operate on floodplain. And at the time, we got an answer that we didn't have to be 1 foot over. It met it where it is, which is at elevation 12, which is the flood level. We actually only found out a few weeks ago, after we had already submitted to you this set of drawings, that there was actually a change in that, and now there's a desire to be 1 foot above it. So we've had a couple of meetings. They were good meetings. They were with Laura and the building department, and there was a lot of back and forth, and I think we threw out a number of ideas. There isn't an exact solution yet. One solution might be to raise the tennis court only 1 foot, and part of the reasoning on that is this, which probably is not clear in these drawings, but the site actually slopes almost exactly 1 foot from the very back to the front. And as you might guess, it's sloping down, right, towards the water. So the difficult part is at the street level, because it's at 12, which is what, the sidewalk and street is at, is right at at that level. The back of the property is actually at 13. So in the original plans, the plans we're submitting, and you're hopefully going to approve, leveled everything at that, at the 12 level. So one solution would be to just take that tilted plane, raise the the tennis court only. And if you look at the plans, there's kind of a funny exiting. We have to have two means of egress out of the tennis court. And those two means of egress actually, just by the nature of how the whole thing works, have to exit either into a lobby space or directly to the exterior. So there are these long hallways. They actually allow us to come out, have a landing that meets code, and then slope it at an ADA approved level and come down and let the other area be on 12. If we're able to do that, it reduces the amount of area that we have to provide other, measures for, which might very well be these louvers that FEMA has. If you go through the FEMA manuals, they've got different gadgets that you can put in that try to prevent water from coming in. But what it's really set up for is that when the flood subsides, the water can get out. So that would be the solution. That's one solution. Another one is to try to deal with the louver system for the entire area and keep it down. And then there might be other things that get suggested, of which I'm not quite sure what they are. It seemed like in the meetings that we had, and they were kind of held quickly because we had this meeting to come to, that there was a general sense that there was a way to meet the requirements. And we appreciated staff working with us to all help us get there.
Well, yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for explaining that. Sounds like you have a couple of options to work out. So.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Building department, building permit issues, though, not planning, so.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, I don't know, a couple other things. I noticed there was a 1-hour wall, but you had, I think you said that the roll-down door, if that's on a fusible link, so I'm assuming it's 1-hour wall on maybe on both sides, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a fusible link on the inside.
To close in the event of a fire.
In the event of a fire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions. Great, thank you. So at this time, I would like to see if there are any public comments.
Chair Williams, we have no public commenters.
Okay. Great, then we can just move on to the Planning Commission deliberation. So that there's no public comments. Sure, I guess.
Make it quick.
Sure.
I
don't know if that's.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to address the other commissioners, I think concerns about the use of the court. When we were doing Broadway tennis, I got marched in front of the fire marshal because he was convinced that we were going to have the Rolling Stones do a concert, and it wasn't just going to be tennis. And if you ever go in there, you'll see more exit signs than has ever been in a space like that, because we had to calculate it for that type of occupancy. That was a hard court. This is a clay court, and it's totally different. You can't use that clay court for anything really other than clay. And if you had a party and you let people go out there, you would destroy the clay court. Oh. And that clay court is not easy and inexpensive to maintain. And that doesn't mean somebody's not going to do anything, but there really is a very big difference between a clay court and a hard court. And I know a lot of people have been concerned you're going to use it for something else and this and that. I mean, obviously, the pre-game and the post-game area, maybe you use that for something else, but I think a clay court, it is a clay court. So just a comment on that. The applicant is, one of the conditions that, about waterproofing the site, the applicant is working with the adjacent neighbor. We don't have anything signed, but he's trying to get permission that we can do something on his side to take care of that. If that doesn't work, there is a way to handle it. And then the last thing is, the one condition that we were not able to work out with staff, and I'm told that no one works it out, it's just a standard thing, but it's number 71, and quite frankly, we object to that. It's an indemnification clause, and I'm sure you get plenty of people that come in here and agree to it, but I personally have not seen an indemnification clause written like that, and we would really appreciate it if that was not made a condition of approval. Because if I was to, there's many, many things that could happen, but technically, if, let's say, the city made a mistake on something and there was a lawsuit, my client has to indemnify the city. There is no insurance that covers indemnification on a lawsuit that they had nothing to do with. If you read it, it's...
We'll take a look at it.
Okay, if you could take a look at it.
And at this time, your rebuttal period is up.
Yes, that's
All right, thank you so much. All right, so we have it here. Selected. Okay, well, thanks for putting that up for us. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing. There's no public commenters, and the commission can deliberate and render a decision. So why don't we start with our remote person? Commissioner Wiggins, would you like to start and provide us with your comments?
Yes, thank you. And I hope I don't get any interference on this mic, but this architecturally seems very nice to me. I've never had any concerns about the architecture. The concerns for me were just understanding, the nut of the special use permit and understanding the private use in the commercial zone. So that's been most of my considerations around that. But given the changed language from staff and condition of approval, talking about it coming back to the director before any change of use happens, I think that satisfies my concerns on that. I really think it's a very attractive looking building. And I don't play tennis, but it seems like it's going to be a pretty exquisite court. I wish it was commercial, purely so that more people could have the opportunity to experience it. But it sounds like there's perhaps some challenges with that anyway. So I don't have extensive comments other than that. Really do admire the architecture. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your comments. Okay, Commissioner Patel, would you like to go next?
I do not really have many comments. It seems pretty straightforward to me. I agree the architecture is quite nice, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Commissioner Nugent?
My only comment is I appreciate the two trees that are proposed in the landscape plan. I think those will be nice and help add some greenery on that street. Otherwise, my comments are the same as they were last, and I see no issue.
Commissioner Ebner?
Thank you for the presentation. It seems like the applicant is giving us all of the information that we need in a sincere and straightforward way. I am opposed to excluding condition number 71 from the list of conditions. I would not support that. I think this is a great use of the property. My only concern, and I think I had voiced this prior, was that I would love it if this facility could find the heart and the time to use it as a segue or lessons for disadvantaged peoples in our community. That would make me feel even better about this project. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those comments. And my comments are pretty similar. I really like the building. I think it's a really nice fit in that neighborhood, which is, industrial. And so it's got this real, kind of hardworking simplicity to it. The brick is kind of unusual in that area, but it's very attractive, especially with the dark, garage door and details. I like the orange roll-up door on the side, and I don't know, that'll be an interesting view from the neighbor's property, but when it's closed, it adds some interest to what would otherwise be, what's currently just the next building over is just a, concrete block wall. I think it's white or something like that. So I think it adds some interest, and I hope the art piece can get worked out. It's unusual that it's a requirement, but I think there's an opportunity to provide some probably subtle interest to the building. So I am a tennis player, so I would love to play tennis there too. It just seems like a great space. I think the fabric roof, I think I've been at the other facility in Burlingame a long time ago. And the fabric roof here seems like it'll be a great source of daylight on a sunny day or on a clear, in the daytime. And, should probably have an interesting glow for the neighbors at nighttime. So I think, I mean, it's an unusual request, but it seems well thought out, and, there doesn't seem to be any reason to object to it. Everything is covered in conditions of approval, and then some, so I don't have any proposed modifications to the conditions of approval. So, if there's no other comments, can I have, we'll want to make a motion. Could we have the request on screen, please? Okay. Can I request a motion to approve this recommendation?
I'll bring forward a motion to approve this recommendation to adopt the resolution to approve the site plan and architectural review for a new two-story, 14,553 square foot private indoor tennis court facility, special use permit to allow a recreational use in the service commercial district based on the findings and modified conditions of approval and a categorical exemption from environmental review pursuant to section 15332 of the California Environmental Quality Act.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Chair Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nutter,
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wiggins.
Yes.
Okay, with that, it's 5-0 approved, and the project is approved.
Through the
Yes.
chair, if I could make a note that the action of the Planning Commission can be appealed within 10 calendar days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, we can close that item and move on to the next item, item number 3. All right, so item number 3 is the election of officers, and this is my last chance to use my handy little gavel as the chair, so we're going to elect new officers. And I was going to, I had a note. Well, I was going to just make a note that it was, that tonight we'll elect or nominate and elect a new chair and a new vice chair, and that they are typically one-year positions, and that, if I remember correctly, it's, we're to vote on a new chair and vice chair as close to June 10th as possible. Couldn't remember if I had the date right, but so this is that meeting. And then the new positions will be effective at the end of this meeting. So with that, would anybody like to make a nomination for a chair? I guess we'll start with the chair.
I actually have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
When is your term ending?
My best guess is 2 years from,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'd like to nominate Vice Chair Ebneter for chair.
I'll second that.
All right, let's take a vote. May I have a roll call vote?
Yes, Chair Williams,
Yes, agreed.
Vice Chair Nutter,
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Nugent,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wiggins.
Yes.
All right, with that, you will become the new chair of the Planning Commission starting at the next meeting.
Thank you all.
Congratulations. All right, with that, we will then move on to vice chair. So can I request a nomination for in vice chair of the Planning Commission?
I would like to nominate Seema Patel for vice chair.
And I'll second that. All right. Then can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, Chair Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brenner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nugent,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
Commissioner Wiggins.
Yes.
All right, congratulations. You are the chair, or the vice chair, I'm sorry. Okay. Great, look forward to working with you both in the coming meetings. So at that point, we can close this item number 3, and we'll move on to reports and announcements. Are there any reports and announcements?
Yes, through the chair, I have several reports and announcements for you. I would like to start with a report on a project. So this is related to the 415 Fairfax single-family design review that came before the commission for approval, given the level of public controversy surrounding that project. In particular, there were concerns from the community about the building being potentially a contributor to a historic district, and also concerns about tree removal. At that time, the Planning Commission approved the project. This was an HAA project, a Housing Accountability Act project, because it included an ADU, and the project was approved with conditions. Since then, the applicant has provided additional information about the tree removal, in particular an oak tree in the backyard that is conflicting with the construction of the ADU. We have received an arborist report from a certified arborist to the satisfaction of the city that identifies that the tree is in direct conflict with the construction of the ADU. Therefore, the city has to move forward with ministerial review and approval of the ADU, even though at the time the project came before the commission, there was a condition that had been added that said that any tree removals would require a tree removal permit. Since tree removal permits are discretionary, we cannot impose that condition. We have confirmed that with HCD, the state Housing and Community Development Department, and they agree with staff's determination, and therefore we will be moving forward with issuing the building permit once we have all of the information from the applicant. So that's just a report out on that particular project. In other news, the City Council did consider the housing element request that the Planning Commission had made for accommodating a study session on June 27th. However, given the time constraints, the Council decided that the schedule as proposed, recommended to staff that we move forward with the schedule as proposed, although they did suggest that should we get another letter from HCD after the next round of reviews, that we consider adding a study session at that point. We are also coordinating, based on the Commission's request, with One Shoreline to bring an informational workshop before the Commission. Hopefully in August. We have an interest from the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission to do kind of a joint workshop with the Planning Commission so that One Shoreline can present all of the information at the same time. And, that will be in advance of the draft general plan coming before the Commission. So we're looking forward to seeing how, we can align all of those timelines together. We'll be working with you if we need a special meeting for that item. But currently we're hoping it can be accommodated in the Planning Commission regular meeting. A couple of additional things. So the next meeting, June 27th, we do have a late item that we have had to add to the agenda. This is going to be the Concar passage request for extending the vesting tentative map, as well as the development agreement for the project that was approved in 2020. So we are in a strict timeline for that, given that the development agreement terminates on September 30th if the property does not Yes, sorry, the development agreement ordinance terminates on September 30th. So we are bringing that item for a planning commission recommendation to city council on June 27th, which will be followed by the first reading, the introduction of the ordinance before city council in July, and hopefully a second reading in August, so that it's effective before the termination date. On July 11th, we also have two items that appear to be lining up. One would be an introduction to the city's plan to propose a TDM ordinance, which is transportation demand measures to manage trip reductions in the city. And in the light of AB 2097, I think that's good timing. We are also anticipating bringing forward a vesting tentative map extension request from Windy Hill for the Block 21 project that the Planning Commission had considered. That application is typically a ZA level approval. However, there are some challenges with the findings that we will be presenting at that meeting, and we would ask the Planning Commission to act on that item instead. And then finally, I will be out of the office until July 10th. So our Deputy Director, Zachary Dahl, will be attending the next two meetings. And if you have any questions, I would appreciate if you can send it to Zach directly. That's it for staff reports. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Manera. If there are no other reports or announcements or comments from planning commissioners, then we can adjourn the meeting. All right, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Martin. Put some sunscreen on.